So we want to welcome everyone to the second advocacy training session. These training sessions have been put into place because the Nebraska chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Nebraska Regional Council for the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry came together and received a grant from the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry to boost our advocacy knowledge and efforts across the state. And so if you missed the last training session, that one is recorded and available on the Nebraska AAP website and also on the Nebraska American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry YouTube site to watch. And we have Dr. Melissa St. Germain will introduce our speaker for today.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dutton. So I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Carla Lester. I have had the opportunity to work with her personally on some advocacy efforts at the national level when we attended the National Advocacy Conference for the AAP. She has worked tirelessly throughout her career to advocate for children. She was initially with Complete Children's Health in Lincoln, and then created her own foundation called Teach a Kid to Fish. She's worked with Children's Hospital and Medical Center with their Heroes program and with their Center for Child and Community, and is now a life coach. And she has worked all along the way with advocacy for children throughout the state of Nebraska and nationally with the AAP. So I'm very pleased to welcome her, and she's going to talk with us about connecting with our lawmakers. So thanks, Carla.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for asking me to speak. It's really flattering. I'm super grateful, and just want to say I'm inspired by everybody, and super excited to talk tonight. So I'm going to talk about introducing yourself to lawmakers, and then I'm also going to talk about advocacy in general, and also about how to create your own advocacy action plan. I'm so excited about Nebraska Advocates for Child Health. I've been in Nebraska for over 19 years, and when I first came as a young pediatrician, there were just a handful of pediatricians, just a couple really in the state, who we all just said, oh, they handle all the lobbying, legislative advocacy stuff. But now, as we all know, we have so many things going on, and so children, families, communities have so many needs. We can't sit on the sidelines. So it's really amazing that we have Nebraska Advocates for Child Health. I wrote this why statement. It's to motivate decision makers to focus on and support children's health and well-being. And how is through a new collaboration between the Nebraska chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the ROCAP, or Regional Organization of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. And our what is...
I just want to tell you we're not seeing your slides.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
You just need to re-share your screen.
Okay. Let me see if I can hit escape and get out. Okay. Sorry about that, you guys. I was a little too excited, I guess. This should work. Can you see it now?
Yeah, there we go.
Yay. Oh my gosh, more talking from me. All right, we'll bust through that one. So the why is motivate decision makers to focus on and support children's health and well-being through our new collaboration between our Nebraska AAP chapter and ROCAP. And these are the key issues that we've decided on: access to care, early childhood, child safety, and mental and behavioral health. Objectives for this talk: define advocacy, the different types of advocacy, but feel free to be creative. All advocacy counts. Start wherever you want, wherever, it's all good. It's all a win-win. Create your action plan and introduce yourself to lawmakers. So what is advocacy? Advocacy, simply put, means speaking out on your patient's behalf. And advocacy means that typically there's some problem that you're noticing within your practice, and it's a way to drive or affect change. And in the context of your work as a physician, there's typically 4 levels of advocacy: individual, community, state, and federal. But as I said, all levels of advocacy are interrelated and integrated. It doesn't matter where you start. And I want to tell you that you already are an amazing advocate. So here's a question that really stumps a lot of us. What's advocacy versus lobbying? So advocacy is an umbrella that encompasses many activities. Typically, we think about it as this umbrella encompassing education, but it encompasses policy change, law, education, persuasion, and it's directed to many different constituents. Lobbying is more of a specific activity. It's a part of advocacy, but it specifically describes activities such as what we think about reaching out to our lawmakers in support or opposition to specific legislation. And then here's the next question is, can I legally take part in lobbying? And I have a little picture of someone walking a tightrope here. And in most cases, the answer is going to be yes. And that the answer is going to be yes when you're representing your own interests and yourself as a physician, your patients, and you're advocating for or against a certain public policy or legislation of your own free will. You're not restricted when it comes to lobbying, if that's the case. You may have some restrictions if you work for a government agency or with your employment. So if you're going to represent your employer, you're going to want to make sure that you work with their advocacy group and you check with the legal department to check on the lobbying guidelines. You may work for a government agency, like I said, or many of the hospitals are nonprofits, so then they have lobbying guidelines as well. Also, if you're working with our chapter, and I'm sure you know ROCAP and the AACAP and the National AAP, you want to make sure that if you're representing them, that that's done within the guidelines. So when you speak on behalf of the National AAP or the chapter or the ROCAP or the AACAP, you can get guidelines for the spokesperson, and you can also reach out to our chapter to provide you with more information on any restrictions, because also when you are a nonprofit, we have that restrictions on lobbying as well. So what are the different types of advocacy? There's 4 different types. We'll start with the individual. And so individual advocacy is what we're typically already doing. And so, yay, we're already advocates and we do it all day long, every day, and we have for all careers. So it's the direct care and the resources that you're providing to your patients every day. You're used to this. Every bit of advocacy is based on this. This is what you do every day. You build a relationship with your patient, with the parents, with the family over time. You build up trust, you build up that compassionate connection. That's how you partner in the community. That's how you partner with legislators, lawmakers, decision makers. It takes trust, it takes time. So you already know exactly how to do it. And for me, I believe individual advocacy also includes you. And so my mantra is to advocate for children, you have to advocate for yourself first. And that encompasses everything. That's a holistic approach to advocating for yourself. That means calendarizing self-care and well-being. It means advocating for your income, time with your family, your friends, your relationships, the causes that are important to you. It's getting time outdoors and being creative. All of us are creative. We don't think we are, but we are. And then also time to be spiritual. So the other parts of the individual advocacy, we all understand because that's really much, prescriptive and what we do on a daily basis. Your advocacy efforts are going to be so much stronger and more powerful if you advocate for yourself as an individual first. Pediatricians and I'm sure child psychiatrists are in the same boat, that we typically haven't done this before we advocate for our patients. So community advocacy is where I've done most of my work. It's my favorite level of work. You're also most likely doing a ton of this already. It builds on and reaches beyond individual advocacy to affect more broadly the children within the community. And a community can be defined geographically, as we know, but think about it as a neighborhood, a school district, a city, or culturally, as in like any ethnic or racial group or religious cluster. And community advocacy, as we've seen with COVID-19 and disparities that have come up, it's really even more important to advocate on the community level. This takes into consideration environmental and social factors, influencing child health, exposure to violence, COVID-19, safe places to play, access to healthy food. And really, community advocacy is where you really cut your teeth and you learn how to work intentionally and on purpose with community partners. And that building of trust is where you're going to really find so much impact in your community for your patients and the families that you're serving. And it's really where you're going to have such joy for yourself too. That's where you're going to find your best mentors. My mentors are public health mentors and educators. And you're going to find your support and connection there. You can serve on a nonprofit board. I've been on the Food Bank of Lincoln for 9 years. I just finished my term there. A local board of health, at your public health department, a committee at your child's school, your church, your neighborhood, whatever. You pick what's most meaningful to you. It all counts, and it's all amazing advocacy. State advocacy, there's our amazing capital. This includes children's health and well-being issues, such as working together to pass a state law like our tobacco ban. So Go Nebraska, that was a really huge, amazing effort that the physicians came in kind of, they take a lot of credit, but they kind of came in the 11th hour with the public health partners and businesses and across the state. But it was a true collaboration that got that in place. And also, this is where you're going to advocate on those practice issues, like your reimbursement rates, your increasing funding for Medicaid payment rates. State advocacy is really critical that we are collaborators and we form a network and you're organized and you have consistent messaging as a group. Federal advocacy involves using your voice to advocate on behalf of national laws and legislation that affect children's health. For example, we all know the federal government appropriates funds for state-run programs. So Medicaid, maternal child health block grant, for example. All 4 levels of advocacy are interrelated, and it doesn't matter where you decide to move forward with any action. So this is the top 10 reasons to advocate, not like we need any, but I was going to tell you that my advocacy story, like I was going to tell in a creative way, like specifically since we're big Beatles fans here, I was going to use the title of Beatles songs to think about like, Revolution, Let It Be, though I've never really done that. But then I thought about like with COVID, nobody told us there'd be days like this, strange days indeed. But then I was thinking that my advocacy career could be more summed up in like SNL skits, like church lady, well, isn't that special? I mean, I have so many stories of when, you go to testify. I mean, you really put some hair on your chest when you put yourself out there like that. But, well, isn't that special? Or the Stuart Smalley in front of the mirror, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and people like me. Before I go in to meet with a legislator or testify, you got to pump yourself up. But I would say my level of advocacy is more like an activist. And I've been more like Will Ferrell in the cowbell skit. Saying if I don't, play the hell out of this thing, I'm going to do a disservice to everyone. So the good news for you is you're already an advocate, but really it's exciting because it makes use of your expertise. It builds long-term success for your career, fuels a sense of energy and community. It's fun. We're all fun people. It's fun to connect in this way and advocate for kids. You definitely can influence policy. You're going to impact elections. So vote kids. Check out the AAP Vote Kids site. Offers an antidote to cynicism, shows the strength in numbers. It will create change. You take the experience, all the work you're doing, and you can move it to scale and affect large population change. It's so impactful and amazing. And it renews your commitment to your career. So when you need that extra little zing of energy in your career, it really helps to start advocating more. So to create an advocacy action plan for yourself, it's important to define your own personal why. That's your vision. It may be similar and most likely will be similar to why you decided to go into pediatrics or child psychiatry. But you may redecide. You may say, wow, after practicing this much time, this is my real vision statement. I can tell you, like, all of my work, my whole career has been led by a vision that I have in my head. And I just always try to keep, and like really quickly when you meet with somebody, whether they align with your vision, you can just tell. I mean, you probably had meetings like that. And it's really exciting when somebody does, and then you can coach yourself during the meeting when they don't. Okay, thank you for meeting with me. But so first of all, figure out what's your why. That's your vision. So no one can ever take your vision for children away. It may even make it stronger, all the things that you have to do to speak up on behalf for children. So my heroes are Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha and Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris and Julie and Katie Beckett. And each of these child health heroes have stories of advocacy that started with their personal journey, like Katie Beckett, who worked with President Reagan to create the Katie Beckett waiver so that children like her daughter could be cared for at home and covered by Medicaid. Dr. Mona is the hero from Flint, Michigan. She was the whistleblower on the polluted water in Flint. And she spoke up after caring for numerous children and families who were telling her about the water and also noting elevated levels. And she talks about in her book, What the Eyes Don't See, which is an amazing book and you should get, is that she told many families who questioned the water, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. So she had to not only challenge her own beliefs, but also be honest with herself and her practice. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, the current Surgeon General of California, she's the person who really talks about ACEs and chronic toxic stress in children and its profound effect on health. So what they have in common, and what I was thinking about, was that they're curious observers of the patients in their practice and what they were facing and what was coming up. And they also, they were listeners. They're curious like a scientist, and they listened and they were willing to challenge their own beliefs and their practice. They all kept going and had major setbacks. It's not going to be perfect. It's not like exactly going to turn out exactly like you want it to, despite all your work. But they're able to keep their work at a really high level, create a movement around the work, and really stay the course. And they told story after story after story. So it's really profound and important to do that. So when you're identifying your story and you create your own narrative as an advocate, why did you want to become a pediatrician or child psychiatrist? Was it about the profession that excited you? Who are some of the people that motivate you in your work? You get to decide who inspires you and who keeps you going. For me, my heroes are children with complex medical needs and disabilities and their parents who care for them. How is the health and safety of your patients personally affected by the systems that they're a part of? And what clinical issues or problems do you see among your patients? And it may declare you that issue. Oftentimes it does. If you look at these really powerhouse heroes, those issues really tapped them on the shoulder and declared them to be advocates. I think COVID is obviously declaring everyone. So you can decide. And then it's very important too to make the issues real. So as you're learning to tell the stories, it's really important to listen to your patients as you do, but the stories are going to be what motivated you to get involved in advocacy efforts. And you're going to think to yourself that I don't want to see another child with brain injury because there are inadequate child helmet laws in our community. Or I don't want to see another child missing their immunizations because their parents can't afford health insurance. I don't want to limit the number of patients that I see because myself and all my physician colleagues don't have adequate payment and we're bound up by regulation. So think about how you can frame these up. I worked with Frameworks Institute. I did a training a couple years ago with Douglas County Health Department, and they talk about using the power of metaphor and story. And I thought it was a really great way. And that's how they framed up ACEs and chronic toxic stress and early childhood brain development as a house. With the foundation and then the scaffolding and all the connections in the brain that are formed through serve and return. So think about things like that. But any story that you tell is going to make the issue more real for a decision maker than handing them, a list of statistics. And the personal touch and story motivates everyone. Here's some tips for reaching out. The most important thing is to really state you're a constituent, is to start, if you're working on the state level or the federal level, to work with your senators, your representatives, and state your constituent. That's who they care about because they're the ones, you're the one who's going to re-elect them potentially. Make your contact personal, like we just talked about. Always include a concrete or direct ask within your communication. Educating alone, and they're not going to fill in the blanks, and they will be happy probably not to have to do that. So don't let them get away with it. So be very specific and give them an ask, and then you're going to follow up with that ask and make repeated contact. And obviously you're not going to bother them, but reaching out and following up and reaching out on a regular basis is a good idea. I was laughing at this slide because I was thinking about how poorly dressed a lot of pediatricians are. I'm not going to speak for everybody, but typically we really struggle. So before you're going, I don't know, child psychiatrists probably have to do a little bit better job than we do, but keep in mind when you're meeting with your elected official, you know, I mean, obviously you're going to look nice, but prepare and plan for the meeting. You can plan, talk about what you're going to, why you care about the issue, how it affects the people, especially the children and families within their district, their constituents. During the meeting, please, you do more listening than talking. Just give them the highlights. You don't have to fill them in on everything. And then let them ask questions, and then you kind of reflect. But the main goal there is listening, and then after the meeting is the following up. This is a great example of the most amazing advocate who I was talking about, Julie Beckett, and also Katie Beckett. Julie is in the striped dress. There's President Reagan holding Katie Beckett on a campaign trip to Iowa, but you might be familiar with her story. I met Julie Beckett at the AAP Legislative Conference, and I was just so excited to meet her. And as I was preparing for this talk, I reached out to her again through the AAP Family Voices, which she's the founder of and is currently on the board. And of course, she called me because advocates always call. So I got a call from Iowa the other day, and she said, "Hi, this is Julie Beckett." And everyone knows she's an amazing advocate who worked with her doctors, the congressman who worked with the vice president, who worked then with President Reagan to put in place eventually the Katie Beckett waiver so that her child and other children and people with complex medical needs and disabilities could be cared for in the home and covered by Medicaid. And Julie Beckett is an example, and Katie Beckett, who died unfortunately in 2012 at the age of 34, and she was a real powerhouse advocate as well, are examples of how your issue finds you. And Julie advocated for the very best for her child. So what they were able to show was that the care of the child at home would be 1/6 of the cost of the care in the hospital. And so what they found was once her story came out on Good Morning America, then they were flooded with calls of other parents calling saying, "We want our kid to go home too," and people across the country. So then they formed the Katie Beckett board, which then would review every case, but then there were so many cases. So then they eventually created the Katie Beckett waiver. So then states can apply on behalf of their citizens for them to be cared for at home. She said, we've got to knock it out of the park waiver because we had a mom of a child who needed the waiver create ours in Nebraska. And she also gave me her contact information and said, feel free to have any pediatrician, child psychiatrist, anybody reach out to me from Nebraska. So that was pretty exciting. Her notes are gold. She walks on water, Democrat, Republican, anyone, drops the phone to listen to her. She said it's critical to reach out to your legislators when they're home. So I was like, for federal advocacy, I was going to have the folks just focus more on working with their national organizations. She goes, that's fine, but they should reach out to their senators and their representative and get them when they're home, and then invite them for photo moments, if you can, to your practice, to your organization. They understand pediatricians and will listen to child psychiatrists and pediatricians. They understand that we know what we know and what we're talking about, so they really trust it. Keep it very simple. Only give highlights. Let them ask their questions if you're not giving them enough information. Never forget to say what you need and follow up with what you're asking for. And she said, ask for no more than 3 kind of little asks. And then just share real pictures of your patients when they look happy and healthy. She was like, Katie was on a vent her whole life, but she had a lot of really amazing, happy, healthy moments. And that will give them the feeling of what that child will experience as an effect of the policy change that you could advocate for with them. Give them the 1-pager and then also a copy of those photos as a leave behind. Hand it to their staff. They should become your best friend and your contact person And you have to follow up directly with a thank you and include your specific ask again and remind them. There is her email if you have any questions. She's doing a consultation with on HRSA with 5 different states this week. So she's awesome. So if you want to work through your national organizations, first of all, you can find your lawmakers really easily at senate.gov or congress.gov. If you want to be efficient and effective, and you can really do quick advocacy if you join the AAP Federal Advocacy Action Network, or FAN, or the AACAP. I noticed had a Legislative Action Center, so I was really interested and excited that they have a lot of all the same resources. Attend the conferences like Mel was talking about. If you're able to, that's something that I invested in for myself. And I'm so glad that I did. It was really fun and I learned a ton, and it's a huge just shot in the arm for your advocacy efforts for career. And like Julie Beckett said, meet with your senators and representatives when they're home. Dr. Bob Rauner is my closest colleague in my work around childhood obesity. He and I have done a ton of advocacy together. And so I asked him, I said, tell me what your takeaways are. Bob is an amazing example of a focused advocate. He is the most focused person. And he has done, I mean, I have a more broad approach, but Bob is so amazingly focused, and it's really paid off for him in a lot of amazing ways. So he said, develop the relationship with your senator. He's talking about your state senator. Ask to meet them, take them for coffee once a year, see what they're interested in talking about when it comes to healthcare. Like Senator Arch said in our last webinar, most senators don't have background in healthcare, so they're going to appreciate a reasonable constituent that they can reach out to and trust when they have any questions that come up. And then once you have that relationship established, which may be literally the one time you take them for coffee, you're not going to have time, and they don't either, to be meeting all the time. But then you've established that relationship and that trust, and then you can reach out on issues that you really want them to advocate for and support. Have the one-page leave behind, preferably with a reference. Don't overwhelm them. He says not to whine about your income. They're making $12,000 a year. They're really not interested in it. It's going to be a huge turnoff. They're going to push you off to the legislative assistant. Do not be offended by that. They're the subject matter expert. So develop that relationship, like Julie Beckett said. Get to know your candidates when they're running for office. If you like them and you want to support them, donate $100 or $200 to our campaign. Physicians typically are pretty bad about this, but I don't know if we think it's buying a vote or, but what you're doing is you're starting that relationship. And it's important to do this because we typically whine when we see other groups get what they want, and it's because they've been supporting and donating, and they're organized around that. And when you're working on an issue, he says if you have access to a lobbyist within your organization, then reach out to them. They have all the inside scoop, and that's what they're there for. I found this on the AACAP site, and I thought it was kind of funny. It's guidelines for working effectively with state legislators, so it's really similar to a lot of the things we've already talked about, but planning, take a long-term view. These are all long track issues. You're not gonna, it requires time and patience. Stick to the facts. The AAP, the AACAP have fact sheets with key information on different things. I have printed off policy statements from the AAP and taken them to my congressman's office. I did that with the immigrant children, detention of immigrant children, and with some of the food security, the food insecurity policy. I just drop them off in person. Keep it short and simple is the KISS principle they use. Claim the high ground. So like I said, I've been in meetings and testified when it has been really interesting. And you just kind of coach yourself, remain calm. This meeting is going south. Thank you for your time, and I'll reach out later. you can't control it. So stop complaining, whining, and being negative, which I thought was funny, which none of us ever are, of course. Remember, legislation is a mostly reactive process. So we're not going to be asked to create legislative bills, or, I mean, we don't have that expertise, and everyone knows that, but it's typically more reactive and supporting bills that have, or opposing bills that have already been written. And then says all politics are local. Of course, it's funny. Kate Bowles, I asked her for some tips. So tip 1, best way to persuade elected officials to help them get elected in the first place. It's fun. Jump in and partner on a campaign, and then they'll be more willing to partner with you on a policy. Summarize the main points, your takeaways, and give it to their staff. The staff will help you work on the details, and avoid jargon. So I thought this was fun. Ask your neighbor or cousin who isn't in your line of business to review your materials and ask questions before using it for advocacy purposes. And then her last tip was be nice. Just don't make any assumptions. Use logic. Discuss the impact in the senator's district. There's usually someone, I've heard this so many times, well, there's someone just as passionate as you on the other side of the argument. So it's really, truly a numbers game. They're going to want to know, they're going to be interested because you're a physician coming and you've got some data and you've got some story, and they're going to be like, okay, that's going to pique my interest. But then they're going to want to know how many people are behind you within their constituency, who are supporting it or potentially opposing it. So I have here a call to action, and that is to work with the Nebraska AAP chapter, ROCAP, and the Nebraska Advocates for Child Health to sign up for AAP FAN or AACAP Legislative Action Center, to start creating your advocacy action plan by answering those questions under identify your story, because you're creating your own narrative. Reach out to your senators and representatives, share the advocacy webinar series with your colleagues, and our next advocacy webinar is with Dr. Beth Ann Brooks on October 9th at noon. So I hope everyone can join us for that. And I want you to keep in mind, and I've learned this the really hard and exhausting way, is that you won't be fixing or solving huge societal problems. You can have huge impact, but believe me, I've tried. Embed your advocacy in reality, be focused, and take action. And here's what you can ask yourself. Did I show up, and did I tend to the causes? So understand that change takes time and patience, and a group of people advocating together is going to be the most powerful. And the one thing I really want you to remember from this talk is that if you want to advocate for children, you must first advocate for yourself. And I have a list of the AAP resources. The first webinar was awesome and talked about the Nebraska legislative process, so check that out. You also have a link that's super quick to identify your Nebraska senator. All you have to do is click on it, put in your zip code. Your senator will come up. You'll have a list of their committees. You'll have a list of bills they've introduced and their contact information, so you can start meeting with them if you haven't already done that. We have AAP state advocacy resources too, and the AAP state advocacy team. Typically, if you're going to work with that team, you will work with Laura and the AAP chapter. And as Dr. St. Germain said, I'm also a life coach. I just became certified, so I'm so excited. I'm not coaching adults, but I love coaching adults, and I have. And I am so passionate about advocacy, especially here in Nebraska, and I'm so inspired and excited that if there are a few of you who would like to reach out to me for some coaching on creating your advocacy action platform, I'm happy to help you out pro bono with that. And there's my email if you need it. So I think that's it. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lester. That was amazing and so full of information. Are we taking questions? Do we have time for questions?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Dr. Lester?
I just want to make, this is Cindy. I just want to make a comment, Kristen, what you said about the making relationships with the aides is very important. Because even if you have an appointment with the senator or legislator, often you'll get there and they've got called somewhere else. And and I found that the best way is to really find out which of the aides has to do with whatever I'm interested in talking about, and making sure that I make that a good relationship also.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But Carla, I really think that this was great.
Thank you.
And just to parrot along what Cindy said, I think each of our Nebraska state senators is limited to 2 staff people. One tends to be an official legislative aide and the other an admin assistant. And my experience has been, especially since we've had term limits, which have been in force as long as I've been back in Nebraska, that after someone is term limited, there's oftentimes a clamor for the exiting senator's legislative aide. They develop reputations and expertise of their own, and some of them have traveled. I think, you know, we have officially a nonpartisan legislature, but some have crossed party lines. And I think some have been in those types of positions for over 20 years. You'll also see some state senators, other people in our governmental ranks who will indicate in their own history that they were a legislative aide prior to doing whatever they are now. So these are individuals who become very knowledgeable, their go-to, and they oftentimes are experts at separating the wheat from the chaff for our senators, whose time expended is unbelievable for the $12,000 we pay them.
Yeah. And Beth Ann, did you want to say anything? I should have put it on the resource slide here about the Voices for Children list that they have around which senators support child health issues.
That was published, Laura, was it about 3-4 weeks ago at most? And I have it in PDF format. I think Laura maybe has converted part of it, but Voices for Children, of course, is an Omaha-based organization, and they maybe have their 1 or 2 particular bills. One was highlighted vertically this year, and then they go across and look at child-focused legislation, and they do a tally for each of the 49 senators as to how they have voted. And it's sometimes revealing. People who I don't always think of as child-friendly or soft and fuzzy have cast far more votes, and vice versa. But you definitely can find some partisan trends, just like with any bill, but things that are softer, that require more resources. Oftentimes, at least in our state, the Republicans are not going to vote in favor of. Just like something, this is an aside, but it's a beef of mine in terms of, was it only 12 or 15 senators, but it was certainly a minority, who were in favor of extending SNAP benefits. We were the only state in the nation that didn't. They were all largely Democratic. In fact, I think they were all Democrats. And then when you looked at the letter from legislators to the administrators of the Big Ten Conference, they were all Republicans except for Senator Wishart as a Democrat. And I thought about that, and I thought, okay, pro-business, football, bars, restaurants, the Haymarket in Lincoln, that makes sense. And I would have sided with the group who want every child to have adequate nutrition. So they're just interesting things, but we can add that to the resource list, can't we, Laura?
Yeah, that would be great.
Certainly.
And they do that annually, to my knowledge. So that's something that needs to be kept updated, because of course some of our state senators will be term limited and we'll have a new elected officials in January.
And they also put out an annual report that just has great data that you can take from, and it does include child health. So, well, if you want to peacefully protest for food assistance now to extend those SNAP benefits, you can meet in front of the governor's mansion. They've been meeting all week and donating food to the Food Bank of Lincoln. And so lots of ways to get involved and advocate.
Any other questions?
As usual, Carla, this was outstanding.
Oh, thank you guys.
It
You're
was excellent. This is Sheila Snyder. I was just going to say, you know, I think it was very, very good advice. And I also went to the AAP legislative conference. Mel and I had attended. And the piece of advice that I took away, and it's kind of silly, like you think that these stories you have about patients don't really amount to much, but I think sometimes it may not totally change someone's mind, but I think it stops them a little bit when you tell them stories about pediatric patients. I showed them a picture of one of my patients that was pretty significant. We for the LegCon that we went to, we were talking about funding research about guns. And so, you know, I think that I think some of that is really powerful, and they don't have that firsthand experience all the time. So it sounded silly when they suggested that we do that, but then we did it, and I was surprised at how powerful that was with all of them.
I'd like to echo that. Senator Anna Wishart here in Lincoln is not my state senator, but I did, on behalf of ROCAP and NMA and other organizations, testify this year in favor of her revised bill for the preferred drug list for Medicaid. This was more of an adult issue, and it had to do with psychotropic medications. But she related to me that her interest in developing this bill was strictly the result of one constituent whose adult brother was disenfranchised and did a complete 360 in terms of the progress he had made in terms of treatment of his schizophrenia. And she continued over and over for 3 years and finally got the bill passed. And that was based on one contact and a human story. So I think we need to remember that, and as much as we can, personalize things or talk about our own experience.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? This has been wonderful. Thank you again, Dr. Lester. And I will reiterate, our next presentation is Dr. Brooks, October 9th at noon. We'll be sending out information as that gets closer. And anyone who wants to be more involved with Nebraska Advocates for Child Health, please contact any of us. And we would love to have more folks included.
Yay.
So that concludes today's presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And
Thanks,
thanks to
everybody.
Laura. Thanks.